It is the first day of December, and actually a couple of hours ago we started things looking pretty bleak. Nvidia has turned a corner, which has kind of changed a little bit the tone, but basically tech lower, crypto lower, and we started December in risk-off mode. Why?
Yeah, I mean, we had a really solid rally last week, on those expectations that the Federal Reserve will be cutting interest rates in December. But as we start off this new week, there's been a turnaround in that sentiment. And I think the catalyst for that, for me, came from Japan. So we had Bank of Japan Governor Ueda adopting a more hawkish tone, really ramping up sort of expectations for a December rate hike. Now, what does this mean and why is it important? Basically, there are concerns now that we might see the unwinding of the carry trade. So that's when we sort of have institutions, investors borrowing in the low interest yen in order to invest in higher yielding riskier assets. Now, if we're seeing the Bank of Japan raise interest rates, we've got yields in Japan, 10-year yields at a 17-year high. There is this concern that we're going to start to see the repatriation of those funds back to Japan. Now, this is important because liquidity changes. And those sort of sectors of the market, such as crypto, such as tech, which are really sensitive to liquidity, are where we're seeing that sort of risk off come through.
December, historically strong, particularly for technology, right? And when I was on vacation last week, what a week to pick. We had the Thanksgiving holiday. Circular financing was a factor, Nvidia in particular weighing on the index level. You just heard the reporting about how the Synopsys Nvidia deal is not circular financing to the mind of the leaders of those companies. Do you buy it? And how big a factor is that in this market right now?
Really good question. I mean, this is front and central, I think, in a lot of investors' minds at the moment, particularly as soon as we hear the name Nvidia. Nvidia's been investing in firms that, are or will be major customers of its products. So, that has raised concerns within sort of the markets. And we've seen that play out in previous weeks where Nvidia really has come under a lot of pressure. It does feel like that is sort of starting to turn a little bit of a corner. Obviously, those comments today, I think, will help a little bit to ease those concerns. But at the end of the day, there is this sort of worries surrounding circular financing, and they're not going to disappear overnight. And that's because circular financing makes an ecosystem fragile. It just takes one disappointment for the whole loop to fall apart. So I think it is right that the market does question whether this circular financing could be a problem.
Meanwhile, Fiona, you could think that these are companies that are strategically thinking of how they can ride extra upside should the AI wins really come to bear. We're going to be digging into how OpenAI is backing a fund of its own VC partner that is looking at integrating its technology into portfolio companies, into service companies, for example. It wins not only by adoption of its technology, but on seeing some equity upside, Fiona. What do you need to see to vindicate that the productivity gains are there?
Yeah, this is why it's so difficult, because I think sometimes or often, if you're in that bubble and it's falling apart, you won't often realize when it's actually too late. I think the numbers that we've been seeing from Nvidia have been encouraging. The latest earnings report was extremely positive. There weren't really any faults there. I think this is just a nervousness that we're seeing. But I think at the end of the day, we know that AI technology is solid. We know that it exists. It's going to increase productivity. There are obviously concerns over monetization, circular funding, revenue lagging investment. But I think, longer term, this technology does have a broad use. And I think that's why over the longer term, this trade is still one that has upside. If we just think about the horizontally, automation, R&D, customer service, vertically, different sectors, and then infrastructure level as well. So this is a very broad technology, which sort of helps ease those concerns over the bubble fears, I guess.
What about crypto?
Yeah. Crypto. I mean, every Monday I feel I wake up and something else is happening in crypto. You know, we saw that rejection at that 92,000, just above that 92,000 level, which was a pretty key level. And I think again, this is that unwinding or fears over the unwinding of the yen carry trade. Crypto is very sensitive to liquidity, and that fear that there might be a slight reduction in liquidity if that unwinding of the carry trade happens is what I see pulling on crypto. Institutional demand is still very weak. You know, we saw November ETFs, they saw outflows of 3.48 billion, so huge outflows. I think second worst month that we've seen so far. So that really does need to turn around before we can expect to see any sort of recovery or solid recovery in the Bitcoin price or crypto prices.